World building is an important aspect of any story. Your setting needs to be believable for the reader or viewer and, more important, internally consistent. At the same time, though, it's easy for creators to obsess over world building details too much, something many writers refer to as world builder's disease. The truth is, the only world building a story needs is enough to establish the setting, sell it to the audience, and maintain verisimilitude. But you have to accomplish these goals while not slowing your story to a crawl and boring your readers or viewers. Over its first few episodes, Girls Und Panzer does a great job of establishing its world, giving us the information we need in order to enjoy the show, and not overburdening us with too many details. Additionally, it's a great example of how to just own the premise and not worry about nitpickers finding little holes or flaws in the world you created. Here's where I pause for the obligatory spoiler warning, since there will be at least one significant spoiler ahead. Again, while the show isn't exactly new, if you haven't already watched it, you really should go in as cold as possible. That out of the way, let's talk a bit about the world of Girls Und Panzer. On its face, the world and the show's premise itself is ridiculous. In this Earth, tank battles is a sport that is perfectly safe and considered a girls' thing, with girls as young as high school age partaking in it. Oh, and all high schools, or at least Japanese ones, are located on aircraft carriers converted to floating cities. A different show might have spent a great deal of time trying to explain the mechanics and logistics of everything to try and preemptively address the inevitable nitpicking of something that sounds so ridiculous. But Girls Und Panzer chose the more Chad route, essentially going, this is how things work here, deal with it, and let's get on with the story. The main thing that Girls Und Panzer needed to establish, obviously, was the tank combat and the things surrounding it, such as the safety of the sport. Much of this is done right in the first episode, through the central promotional video shown to ORI's students. As an aside, as I rewatched the scene a few weeks ago, I realized that in this brief shot during the video, Yuzu is standing at the microphone and speaking. Meaning that she's the one narrating it, and this also might mean that the student council made this video. If that's the case, it's just another example of how far they were willing to go to build a Senshido team, and it makes the over-the-top nature of the propaganda all the more hilarious. But back to the world building. This video, whether made by the student council or whether it was an older archival video, succinctly makes it clear to us that in this world, tank combat is a womanly thing. Girls Und Panzer never goes deep into the history of Senshido or anything like that, because it's completely unnecessary for the story it's trying to tell. Trying to go into detail on Senshido's history or trying to explain why the sport developed like this would just bog down the story without much benefit. It would be trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Girls Und Panzer is a story primarily about sportsmanship, cooperation, and friendship. The tanks are just a vehicle for that, and of course they're also there to attract fans of history and military stuff. The same goes for the safety aspect of the sport. The show could have completely bogged itself down trying to provide detailed explanations about that, but then again, that's not necessary because the mechanics of the sport are not what we're here for. And, no matter how many sci-fi explanations one might come up with, the girls just poking their heads out of the tanks would ruin pretty much all that anyway. So the show gives us a single, almost throwaway line from Yukari addressing the safety question, and it leaves it at that. It's almost a challenge thrown at the viewer. This is how it is. No, we're not going to explain it anymore, but it's so cool you won't care. In fact, the schools being on aircraft carriers almost feels like the creators are just telling us, yeah, this show is full of cool stuff we wanted to do. No, we won't explain, and you're going to love it too. An extremely Chad move. It also demonstrates an understanding of the viewers. Consumers of fiction are willing to accept more than you might think, and suspend their disbelief up to a point, if the story is fun and engaging enough, and if the setting is internally consistent. Especially when you're selling a somewhat more ridiculous premise to people, the last thing you want to do is draw their attention to those details that would be easier to nitpick. There's also an element of trusting your viewers, or readers, to accept what you've created, and confidence that your creation is so good, these theoretical world-building issues will not matter. The writers of Girls Und Panzer understood this and ensured that the world of the show is internally consistent, in terms of how the sport works, how the tanks function, and the general capabilities. That's what really matters here, no matter what sort of world you're building. To provide an example from a different show, Attack on Titan also provides an example of just telling the audience this is how things are, and trusting us to come along for the ride. The vertical maneuvering gear, a key part of that world, really would have trouble working as intended in real life but it's sold so well in the show that we don't have trouble accepting it being used as it is. On the other hand, however, shows like Attack on Titan, in contrast to Girls and Panzer, must go deep into the many aspects of the world, politics and other things, because they're integral to the plot. There we have entire episodes, heck, entire arcs, if not more, that fully focus on complex bits of world building. That sort of thing would not have made sense for Girls and Panzer, since, as I mentioned earlier, it would harm the pacing if not the story as a whole. So, as is typical with Girls and Panzer, the writers tell us a lot with a little. One major potential pitfall regarding world building is what's often referred to as info dumping. That's where a ton of info is given to the reader or viewer in a single burst, often bringing the entire story to a halt. In a visual medium, this would most often be done via a long monologue or conversation. It's not just good enough to have all your ducks in a row when it comes to the details of the world building. You also need to be able to get that info across to the audience in the right way. A better way to get the information across is to spread little bits of information out in natural sounding conversations or via other creative means. Girls and Panzer, with its excellent writing, manages to do just that. For example, the promotion propaganda video I talked about earlier succinctly tells us everything we need to know about Senshido's history as a sport and its place in the world's culture. But because it's done in an entertaining, somewhat over-the-top video, it doesn't run the risk of boring us. Additionally, through character reaction shots, we get early looks at many of the girls who will be joining the Senshido team, accomplishing two things at once, and turning what might have otherwise been throwaway crowd shots into little bits of foreshadowing. Other little bits of relevant lore information get gradually given out as needed, such as Yukari's single-sentence explanation of why Senshido is safe, and the old man celebrating when a match destroyed his shop, a tongue-in-cheek way to express the property damage question, considering where many matches are held. Other bits of relevant information, like the limits on what tanks, equipment, or modifications are legal, are similarly given to us as needed or just shown. Anyone who knows tanks or cares to look them up, for example, can easily figure out the general cutoff point for which era's tanks are legal to use in these matches. The show doesn't go into much more detail than that, of course, and like I said at the start, it really doesn't need to. Over the course of the season, we learn all that we need to know in order to understand the world of Girls and Panzer, and to suspend our disbelief as we enjoy the story and the action. Fans might make jokes or memes about some of these things, but the over-the-top premise and limited information we get about the world never lessens our ability to enjoy the show for what it's meant to be. They stuck to the bit and trusted us, the viewers, to join them for an awesome ride. If you enjoyed this video and would like to support the channel, links to my books and light novels are in the description below. Additionally, check out my Patreon. Among other rewards, such as early looks at updates from my various writing projects, you'll get to see future videos early as well. And of course, if you have any thoughts on this video, or aspects of the show you'd like me to talk about, definitely share them in the comments section below. I'd love to hear them, and I do my best to read and respond to all of the comments. That's all for now, so until next time.